Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The truth had been inching toward daylight for weeks, but no one in Genoa City was prepared for the explosive, soul-shattering revelation that was finally about to rip the town in half. Everything began unraveling when the frantic search for Noah Newman stretched into its second week, with Matt remaining the prime suspect, the man everyone blamed, the man everyone whispered about in hushed tones behind closed doors. The evidence, the circumstantial trail, the eyewitness accounts that were too perfect, all of it seemed to point directly at Matt as the heartless villain who had abducted Noah without mercy. But the truth, the real truth, was 1,000 times darker than anything anyone had imagined. While Sharon cried herself to sleep each night and Nick tore the town apart searching for his son, while Victoria scrambled to keep the Newman empire stable during the chaos and Faith begged for answers no one seemed able to give, the true architects of this nightmare were hiding in plain sight, wearing masks of grief and concern, weaving lie after lie with the precision of serpents coiling through shadow. And now, after days of unraveling threads and whispered suspicions, the whole horrifying scheme was finally coming to light. Phyllis Summers and Cane Ashby had kidnapped Noah, and framed Matt to take the fall. It began when Chelsea stumbled across a digital footprint buried deep within Noah's last known phone transmissions, a footprint that should have never existed, a metadata pattern that was traced not to Matt, but to a burner device linked to a shell company Cane had established months ago. That tiny discovery ignited the spark that would burn down the entire lie, sending detectives spiraling into a deeper investigation and pushing Chance to confront the overwhelming feeling that the case had been too clean, too perfect, too convenient. And then came the second blow, a security camera glitch at the warehouse where Noah was last seen, a glitch that IT analysts discovered wasn't a glitch at all, but a remote override. When they dug deeper, bypassing levels of encryption not even seasoned criminals would dare attempt, they stumbled into a hidden folder labeled with an innocuous code that masked its true purpose. Inside were time-stamped feeds from the night of Noah's disappearance, and in 2 frames that had been poorly edited, digitally smudged in haste, the silhouettes were unmistakable. Not Matt. Not even close. But Cane, tall, unmistakable posture, and beside him, the distinctive sway of red hair that only belonged to Phyllis Summers. The detectives froze. Chance nearly dropped the tablet. And Chelsea gasped in disbelief because she had defended Phyllis, stood by her grief-stricken performance, believed her tears were real. But the footage didn't lie. The truth smashed every illusion to pieces. Phyllis and Cane had orchestrated the entire abduction. And just when Genoa City thought the shock couldn't get any deeper, a second bomb detonated, this time courtesy of a hidden recording Noah himself had managed to capture on a malfunctioning smartwatch before he lost consciousness. The audio was staticky, broken, but clear enough to reveal a chilling truth. Noah had recognized Phyllis's voice moments before everything went black. "Phyllis, why are you?" "Cane, what?" His words cut off, replaced by the unmistakable thud of a blow and the frantic rustle of fabric as he was dragged away. Sharon collapsed when she heard the playback. Nick punched a wall so hard his knuckles split. Victoria whispered, "This can't be real," but the evidence screamed otherwise. The final layer of the lie that had suffocated the town was peeled back, revealing the monstrous core hidden beneath. The real kidnappers had been the 2 people no one had dared suspect. The investigators' findings shattered through the Newman family like a sledgehammer. Phyllis, Noah's former stepmother, a woman who had embraced him, celebrated birthdays with him, dry-eyed his heartbreaks, had been lying the entire time. And Cane, a man already teetering on the edge of redemption, had plunged headfirst into an abyss darker than any of his earlier scandals. Together, they had taken Noah. Together, they had staged the crime scene. Together, they had built the perfect trap to destroy Matt. The warehouse tire tracks, the stray cuff fiber accidentally left at the crime scene, the anonymous tip that placed Matt nearby at just the right time, all fabricated. All engineered. All designed to crush one innocent man in a plan so twisted it made even Adam's past schemes look tame. The motive? It came crashing into focus with the discovery of encrypted messages between Phyllis and Cane retrieved from cloud backups they believed were untraceable. Phyllis had been growing increasingly resentful of Matt, convinced he had manipulated Diane and disrupted her own position within the Abbott orbit. Cane had his own demons, bitterness over being shut out of Chancellor Winters, anger toward Matt for exposing one of Cane's dirty dealings weeks earlier, a fury he had never admitted publicly. And beneath it all, a shared determination to prove they could outsmart everyone, the Newmans, the Abbotts, the cops, even fate itself. But ego had blinded them. Desperation had driven them. And now, the walls were closing in. When the truth officially broke, when the press got wind of the leaked evidence and GC Buzz blasted the headline across town, Noah's real kidnappers identified, Phyllis Summers and Cane ASHBY. Genoa City erupted into chaos. Crowds gathered outside Crimson Lights, furious, confused, demanding answers from anyone even loosely connected to the case. Reporters flooded the police station. Hashtags calling for justice trended worldwide. And inside her suite at the Grand Phoenix, Phyllis spiraled into a panic unlike anything she had ever experienced. She shredded documents, smashed her phone, screamed at Cane over a video call, ordering him to fix this now as though some magical eraser could undo the avalanche of proof suffocating them. But Cane was unraveling too. Sweat dripped down his temples, his hands shook violently, and the weight of what they'd done, the kidnapping, the lies, the framing of an innocent man, finally crashed through his delusions. "We crossed a line we can't come back from," he muttered, voice trembling. "No more lies, Phyllis. It's over." But Phyllis refused to accept defeat. Her red hair wild, her eyes manic, she hissed through clenched teeth, "We don't lose. Not like this." But even she could feel it, the walls were closing in. The net was tightening. The truth had claws, and it was tearing them apart piece by piece. Meanwhile, Chance and the task force stormed the abandoned shipping container where Noah had been held. Inside, they found traces of Phyllis's perfume, embedded in a blanket, lingering faintly in the stale air, alongside Cane's fingerprints on a rusted chair leg. Every piece of evidence screamed guilt. And then, behind a loose panel, they discovered something even more damning, a second phone connected to a tracking app Cane had used to monitor the search efforts in real time. He had watched every police movement, every Newman meltdown, every moment of panic, calculating exactly how long he could drag out the lie before finding Noah and becoming the hero he so desperately wanted to be. But Noah had thrown off their timeline by escaping on his own. Disoriented, dehydrated, but fueled by sheer willpower, he had managed to flee into the woods before collapsing near a service road where a delivery driver spotted him. That miraculous escape forced Phyllis and Cane into cleanup mode, scrambling to readjust their lies, planting evidence to further frame Matt, and pretending to be devastated when news broke that Noah had been rescued but was in critical condition. But even as they feigned heartbreak, Noah, though weak, whispered the truth to Nick the moment he woke. It was Phyllis and Cane. "They took me." Nick's world shattered in an instant. He staggered back, eyes wide, jaw clenched so tight it trembled. Sharon sobbed into her hands. Victoria demanded immediate action. And Adam, for once, stood stunned into genuine silence. Then came the final confrontation. At the Grand Phoenix penthouse, police sirens wailed outside as Phyllis barricaded herself inside, screaming at Cane through her phone, begging him to run, to get out of town, to make the evidence disappear. But Cane, exhausted and beaten by the weight of the truth, didn't run. Instead, he walked straight into the police station, shoulders slumped, eyes empty, and confessed everything in a breaking voice. Chance stared at him, barely containing his fury. "Why?" Chance demanded. And all Cane could whisper was, "I wanted control again. I wanted revenge. I wanted something I can't even name anymore." But Phyllis? She refused to surrender. Even as cops pounded on her penthouse door, yelling for her to open up, she ranted and raved, insisting she had been set up, that Noah had misremembered, that the footage was fake, that Cane had turned on her. But inside, she knew the truth had finally caught her. Her empire of lies had crumbled. When the door was finally breached, Phyllis screamed, clawed, kicked, and swore the entire way down the hallway as officers hauled her out in handcuffs, a stark, devastating image the world would replay for years. Across town, Matt, still recovering from being blamed, humiliated, betrayed, watched the breaking news report with tears in his eyes as the anchor declared his name officially cleared. The town owed him an apology, but nothing could erase the torment he'd endured. The aftermath of Phyllis and Cane's unmasking sent shockwaves through Genoa City so powerful that even those with no personal involvement felt the tremors deep in their bones. The Newmans, the Abbotts, the Chancellors, every powerhouse family stood rattled, stunned, reeling. The headlines wouldn't stop. News vans clogged the streets surrounding the police station. Pundits on every network were dissecting every detail of the scandal. And social media erupted with millions of posts demanding justice for Noah, apologies for Matt, and lifelong accountability for the two who had caused so much devastation. Even Diane, who had been convinced for weeks that Matt had something to hide, was forced to face a painful truth. Her judgment had been manipulated by Phyllis's crocodile tears and Cane's orchestrated diversions. She felt humiliated, livid, and deeply betrayed. Jack stood by her, but even he couldn't deny that the entire situation had him questioning everything he'd believed about trust, loyalty, and the people he'd once called friends. Meanwhile, at Memorial Hospital, Noah's recovery became a beacon of hope in the middle of all the chaos. Nurses and doctors noted how resilient he was, how determined he seemed not only to heal but to speak the truth before anyone tried to silence him again. Every morning, Nick and Sharon camped out at his bedside, refusing to leave him alone for even a minute. Victoria brought food. Faith brought blankets. Mariah and Tessa brought music to keep his spirits up, filling the sterile room with warmth and familiarity. And though Noah was still weak, pale, and fighting bouts of dizziness from the trauma he'd endured, his spirit refused to break. When Chance arrived to take his full statement, Noah insisted on sitting upright, gripping the hospital tray table to steady himself as he relived the nightmare aloud. His voice trembled, but he didn't falter. He described every detail. The moment he realized the voice behind him was Phyllis's, the flash of Cane's shadow, the sickening smell of the cloth over his face, the echoing clang of the container door slamming shut. Sharon wept quietly through the entire recounting, holding Nick's hand so hard her knuckles whitened. Nick stared at the wall, face rigid, fighting the overwhelming urge to storm out of the hospital and confront Phyllis one last time. But Noah needed him to be strong. He had already been through hell, and the last thing he needed was more chaos. Yet the chaos found them anyway. Just hours after Noah's official statement was signed, sealed, and added to the case file, Cane's attorney attempted to file a motion claiming the confession was coerced. The attempt was laughable considering Cane had walked into the station voluntarily and spilled the entire truth without prompting, but the move revealed one thing: Cane wasn't as committed to taking responsibility as he'd initially appeared. He wanted leniency. He wanted sympathy. He wanted an escape hatch from the nightmare he'd helped create. But Genoa City wasn't in a forgiving mood. Not this time. Even Jill, who had defended Cane through some of his worst scandals, couldn't bring herself to speak to him. She visited the station once, staring at him through the glass of the interrogation room with eyes full of sorrow, disappointment, and disbelief. When Cane tried to speak, she raised a hand, not in anger, but in utter heartbreak, and whispered, "You crossed a line I can never bring you back from." And then she turned and walked away, leaving Cane crumbling in the chair, gripping the table with trembling hands. But it was Phyllis whose downfall was the most brutal, chaotic, and public. Her arraignment drew such a crowd that the judge had to order additional security to keep the courtroom from overflowing. Protesters outside shouted for justice while others demanded she be locked away for life. The courtroom atmosphere was suffocating, thick with fury and shock as Phyllis strutted in wearing designer clothes, hair freshly styled, refusing to appear broken. But her eyes, they betrayed her. They were wild, frantic, darting around the room as though looking for someone to swoop in and save her. But no one would. Not Jack. Not Nick. Not even Daniel, who had been torn in half by the news and ultimately chose to protect Summer and Lucy from the fallout by staying far away. When the charges were read, kidnapping, conspiracy, obstruction, falsifying evidence, endangerment, Phyllis clenched her jaw so tight the tendons in her neck strained. And when the prosecution mentioned the audio recording Noah had taken, her eyes flickered with a rare flicker of panic. But she quickly snapped back into defiance, hurling accusations at Cane, insisting he manipulated her, brainwashed her, forced her into helping him. The courtroom erupted in gasps and murmurs as the judge slammed his gavel, demanding order. But Phyllis didn't stop. She ranted, she raved, she insisted she was innocent, she accused the entire Newman family of setting her up to protect Matt. The spectacle was so outrageous that the judge ordered her removed from the courtroom. She didn't walk out. She was dragged. Meanwhile, Matt's name was finally being cleared publicly, but with vindication came an emotional collapse. He had been slandered, hunted, cornered, and nearly arrested for a crime he had nothing to do with. His reputation had been shattered. His business deals put on pause. His relationship strained nearly to breaking. He tried to appear strong, insisting he didn't need comfort, but the facade crumbled when Jack visited him. Matt broke down for the first time since the ordeal began, shaking with the weight of what had been done to him. Jack put a hand on his shoulder and said quietly, "You didn't deserve any of this." And for once, Matt didn't argue. But even with Cane and Phyllis behind bars, the fallout was far from over. The Newmans, the Abbotts, and even the Winters family circle found themselves swept into a storm of accusations, public outrage, and media harassment. Noah's kidnapping had exposed cracks in every relationship, cracks created by mistrust, quick assumptions, and hidden resentment. Sharon struggled with guilt, convinced she should have somehow sensed the truth sooner. Nick wrestled with rage so deep he worried what he might do if he ever came face to face with Phyllis again without police supervision. Victoria felt ashamed for pushing so hard against Matt without considering all the possibilities. And Diane felt crushed beneath the weight of her own misjudgment. The ripple effect extended even farther. Summer was devastated, torn between the horror of her mother's actions and the heartbreaking truth that Phyllis had tried to drag her into the vortex of lies through emotionally manipulative phone calls in the days before her arrest. Kyle tried to support her, but their relationship buckled under the strain. Summer cried on the terrace of society one night, confessing to Kyle that she felt like she had inherited a curse from her mother, a curse of destruction, chaos, and heartbreak. Kyle held her while she sobbed, but even he worried what this scandal meant for their future. Could they survive such a bombshell? Or would Phyllis's sins poison yet another generation of relationships? And then came the most unexpected twist of all, the discovery of a hidden message buried deep within Cane's encrypted folders. As Chance and the task force combed through every file, they uncovered a digital ledger documenting payments that didn't make sense. Payments to unknown accounts. Payments labeled insurance and backup control. Payments aligned perfectly with the timeline of Noah's kidnapping. At first, the team assumed Cane had paid accomplices to assist him and Phyllis. But the truth was more disturbing. The payments traced back not to criminals, but to a private investigator in another state. A PI who specialized in gathering personal dirt on influential individuals. And the target? Matt. Cane hadn't just framed Matt with false evidence, he had began planning a character assassination months before Noah's abduction, gathering photos, documents, fabricated connections, and doctored files of wrongdoing that could have destroyed Matt's life permanently. This discovery deepened the horror of the situation and raised new questions. Had Cane intended to use Noah's kidnapping as leverage? Did he plan to blackmail or ruin Matt long before the kidnapping unfolded? And was Phyllis aware of the extent of this plot? Or had Cane kept her partially in the dark while manipulating her emotional vulnerability? Sharon immediately demanded answers. Nick wanted the PI charged as well. The DA promised to investigate every angle. Meanwhile, Noah struggled with nightmares, waking up drenched in sweat, heart racing, reliving the moment the cloth covered his face. Sharon climbed into bed beside him more than once just to calm him, reminding him he was safe. Nick sat outside Noah's door at night, refusing to sleep until he heard his son breathing steadily. The trauma would take years to fully heal. But Noah was determined not to let Cane or Phyllis steal his future. "They don't get to define me," he told Victoria one afternoon, voice still raspy but steady. "I get to choose what happens next."